and Madison, Wisconsin, the city where I live. What is the environment that Ed grew out of? This is a simple domestic group of homes on the south side of Milwaukee, the type of working class Polish community that still exists today in Milwaukee that Ed came out of. St. Stanislaus Church, the foundation of these communities was the Catholic Church. And to this day, many of those communities, be it Hispanic or Polish, still celebrate this relationship that they have with the Catholic Church. Like the Baptist communities of the south of the United States, the Catholic churches still command great respect. Now, next one. Here is St. Joseph's Basilica, which was also in Ed's neighborhood. The Milwaukee Public Museum, or the Old Milwaukee Public Museum, which he also enjoyed visiting, known for its fabulous dioramas. I was born and raised when my dad was talked into it by my mother to drive 50 miles to Milwaukee to go to a museum and look at these great dioramas of ancient worlds like Greece and Egypt and Rome, that my childhood textbooks came alive. And of course, what Ed helped to celebrate during the 1950s, 60s, and early 70s was an urban renewal pattern that not only envisioned architecture like this, modern architecture, geodesic domes. This is actually a botanical garden, because you notice in the immediate bottom foreground that white substance, which of course is snow, because of the frozen tundra that we live in 3 months out of the year. But Ed's work glorified and was part of this world. Not only his paintings, but his mosaic murals and his life as an educator at the art school, the Layton School of Art. A little bit of background. Remember that by age 22 in 1936, Ed was working for the WPA. What does the WPA stand for? Works Progress Administration, exactly, which was set up by the Roosevelt administration to encourage the development of art in America so that it wouldn't die during the Depression. Artists were paid what type of wages? They were paid the equivalent of what a plumber, a skilled plumber, would make at that time, which was only a few dollars a week. But, you know, we were talking about the Depression. Also at that time, Ed worked for the WP for a period of 3 years. Now, early in Ed's career, he was very fortunate to be included in such stellar exhibitions and at such stellar venues in collections as the Phillips Collection in Washington, D.C. Mrs. Roosevelt, that is Eleanor Roosevelt, took a liking to one of Ed's paintings, bought it, and it's today at Hyde Park in the Roosevelt Presidential Library. Nelson Rockefeller, the great Rockefeller family, also purchased one of Ed's paintings during this period. The Museum of Modern Art, Ed was involved in having an exhibition there, as well as the 1939 New York World's Fair. This is all before the guy turns 30 even. I mean, like, you can tell why I was afraid of him, right? Because this bio was just commonly available. People talked about it. In 1949, as you know, after World War II, Ed did serve in the war. In 1949, he briefly went to Florida State University in Tallahassee, Florida, to teach. One of his early successful paintings is this urban scene, and as you know, Ed specialized in these urban scenes and this is quite unusual, these figures in the bottom left-hand side. This is actually a view of New York City. And Ed early on became affiliated with Edith Halbert and the downtown galleries in New York City. And he continued to show there almost all of his professional life. It was through the downtown galleries that he met Shaler, Charles Shaler, as well as Ralston Crawford, and also through the Layton School of Art, which he had attended as a young man. He came under the influence of Garrett Sinclair, who, ironically, my mother-in-law also studied under. Garrett Sinclair was a very popular American, Wisconsin arts educator at this time. Here are some current views of some of those industrial buildings that Ed loved. In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a few weeks ago, I drove around photographing what those urban scenes look like today. Many of the buildings which were abandoned by the time Ed left Wisconsin, which I believe was 1974, right around in the early 70s, after the school closed, and he came to Rock Hill. Many of these buildings were abandoned. I worked in this building years ago as an art conservation apprentice. Again, ironically, how our paths actually melded. Here's one of Ed's early works in watercolor. This is the Schlitz Brewery, right here. As you know, Milwaukee was well known for, not only for its many drunkards, but for its production of beer throughout the city. And here we have a glorification of that industrial environment that Ed so much liked to document. And his work, as I had mentioned earlier, is truly a document to this urban environment and this urban fabric, much of which no longer exists today. You can see the same decline in that just a block over, where the textile mill here in Rock Hill is also in the process of being torn down. This is what that area looks like today. In the background on the left is Jones Island, and I'll discuss that later with some of Ed's images. Ed loved to go to Jones Island. Why? Because it was a center of maritime fishing as well as large maritime industry. And these bridges and urban constructions, as well as the homes of very, very humble people who lived along Jones Island, and this small chunk of land in the middle of the Bay of Milwaukee always had a particular quality to it. It is not unlike, to a lesser degree, but not unlike the tradition of the Gullah people of the coast of South Carolina. Here's one of Ed's studies of this area along Jones Island. And what do we have here? What are the images? John, what are the images? Fishing boats and buoys. These fishing boats are a particular type of fishing boat because they're enclosed and not exposed to the elements. Because when you are fishing in the middle of winter on Lake Michigan, it's bitterly cold and you freeze almost instantly. So these types of ships at one time were very common. Ed documented them in his work. Also buoys we have. This large crane is for what? It moved and offloaded coal as well as iron ore. Here's one of the big iron ore ships. And we have the lighthouse right there. Ed's precisionist qualities and the work that we always think and associate with Ed are found in those very fine straight lines, though this is an early study as he was developing his own particular style. Here's one of those bridges that still exists today, though it's no longer in use on Jones Island, where Ed cherished going down. And you know, this was only less than a mile from where he lived. So he painted the environment that he knew best and the urban environment of his native city. Another view along the river. This is Jones Island. This is where you would have seen all those great iron ore ships like the Edmund Fitzgerald you know that story, the song, you know, with the ship, etc. Well, he glorified